My main gripe with the current timeline is that it sucks really bad and makes me angry whenever I see it. The Fallen Hero timeline only exists as a what if section, which removes any weight the branch would carry. Then there's Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which exist in a state of quantum superposition, where they are both canon and not canon depending on who you ask and what Aonuma had for dinner last night. That being said, I still absolutely love to theorize about the Zelda series, and I think that the lore and story are what makes it special. So something like blatant retcons and inconsistencies aren't going to stop me from writing my own fan fiction timeline that I think functions much better. So that's what we're doing. We are fixing the Zelda timeline. About a year ago, I made a video where I fixed the Zelda timeline. Please don't watch that video. The audio alone is enough to lower your life expectancy. And there's a ton of new info that we need to consider now. I enlisted the help of my good friend and fellow YouTuber Gossip Guys to review and fix silly mistakes that I made in my last video. The main factors that we need to consider are Echoes of Wisdom and the fact that Age of Imprisonment, the new Hyrule Warriors game, is canon. Believe it or not, these two simple additions make a really big difference when trying to consider the overarching story. So, without further ado, let's jump into this. Skyward Sword is going to be the most obvious pick to start the timeline. This is because of two main factors. The first, and most important, is the creation of the Master Sword. This weapon is used in too many Zelda games for it to be created at some other point in the timeline. The second is that this Princess Zelda is the one who goes on to create the royal bloodline. She is literally the goddess Hylia, and that magical goddess blood is what allows for the sacred power that Zelda wields in all of the other games. Now, one of the main problems with Skyward Sword is that it decides to play around with time travel. And as we know from Ocarina of Time, this never leads anywhere good. I have had many people try and tell me that Skyward Sword is a closed loop and doesn't make any timeline branches. Their main argument is that Impa has the bracelet that Zelda gives her in the past for the entire game. This is fine and all, but we are shown plenty of other examples of why the time travel in Skyward Sword is not as stable as people would like to pretend. In Skyward Sword, in order to save the Thunder Dragon and complete your quest, you must plant the Life Tree seed in the past and then bring the fruit to him to save him. This results in two massive changes. One, the Life Tree does not exist in the present until you go back in time to plant it, and two, you literally prevent the Thunder Dragon from dying in the present by altering the past. This is not closed loop behavior. My second argument is that if we defeat Demise in the past, then why is the imprisoned here in the present? Again, this is not closed loop behavior. Finally, the most important piece of evidence that convinces me that some kind of time travel shenaniganry is going on is the goddess statue. After the final dungeon in Skyward Sword, Link uses the Triforce to defeat the imprisoned once and for all. This is done by the Isle of the Goddess falling from the sky and destroying the imprisoned completely. After that, Girahim goes back in time to revive Demise before he was destroyed by the Triforce. This is where Link embarrasses the literal incarnation of evil in a Final Destination 1v1 no items duel. Now, here is my beef. If Link straight up defeats Demise in the past, then the imprisoned should no longer be a problem for us to deal with in the present. So, obviously, Link never would have needed to use the Triforce to defeat the imprisoned, because he shouldn't even be there anymore. In fact, Link's entire adventure in Skyward Sword would have been nullified if the imprisoned wasn't there to cause problems in the first place. Now, these two events can exist simultaneously, but only if they exist as two completely different timelines. There are serious ramifications for altering the timeline to this degree, and this is why I propose that Skyward Sword creates a timeline split right at the top of the timeline. We have one timeline where Demise is murdered by Link using the Master Sword, and the other timeline where the imprisoned is eradicated using the Triforce. We will call these two the Wish Timeline and the Murder Timeline. Let's start by looking at the Murder Timeline. At this moment in time, there are a few things going on. First, Demise was able to bind his hatred to the hero spirit and blood of the goddess. This is kind of important later. Second, the Master Sword is placed in a pedestal, which we see in the past and present, with a freshly sealed Demise slowly dissolving away within it. Third, Now that Demise has been sealed away inside of the Master Sword, the surface in this time period is now considered to be safe. So the recently rescued Skyloftians up in the sky eventually make their way back down to the surface. During this time, the establishment of the Kingdom of Hyrule begins. There are, of course, problems with the founding of Hyrule because despite Demise being defeated, there are still demons, monsters, and evil spirits scattered throughout the land. During this time, a new hero, the Hero of Men, that's mentioned in Minish Cap's backstory, is given a sword from the skies, the Picori Blade, which, if you look closely, strongly resembles the Goddess Sword from Skyward Sword. The reason for this is because in this timeline, Skyward Sword Link never needed to pull the Goddess Sword and turn it into the Master Sword. So, what we're seeing here is a brand new path for the Goddess Sword that's entirely unique to this timeline. Now, here's the fun part. Because this timeline started 1,000 years or so before Link was born in Skyward Sword, the Hero of Men described in Minish Cap could totally be the same Link that we play as in Skyward Sword. He's still a chosen hero that was destined to do something heroic, but he's just a little displaced because of his own actions from another timeline. In other words, it's actually the same hero who ends up wielding the Goddess Sword, as well as the Picori Blade, which then leads us into the events of Minish Cap. During Minish Cap, Link takes ownership of the Picori Blade and transforms it into the Master Sword's spiritual counterpart, the Four Sword. Basically, instead of forging the Master Sword by absorbing 3 goddess flames in Skyward Sword, we forge the Four Sword by absorbing 4 elements in Minish Cap, which we then use to defeat Vati. This leads us into Four Swords, where we fight that pesky wind mage Vati again, and then directly into Four Swords Adventure, where we fight an escaped Vati once more, followed by Ganon for the very first time in this timeline. This is important because up until this point in the timeline, the Triforce has not been used once. Normally, Ganon turns himself into this beast form only after utilizing the Triforce piece of power. But given the current timeline of events, this couldn't have happened. Instead, Ganondorf loses his humanity by collecting the trident from the pyramid in the Desert of Doubt. The trident is said to grant anyone who wields it the power to become the King of Darkness, which turns out to be a nice little alternative to using the Triforce. This version of Ganon then goes on to haunt the remainder of this timeline. A really cool fact is that we see some dungeons in Four Swords Adventure that make another appearance throughout the timeline. This includes the Desert Temple and the Eastern Palace. At the end of Four Swords Adventure, Ganon is sealed away inside the Four Sword by the 7 maidens, and the sword is then placed back into its pedestal in the Four Swords Sanctuary. Now, at this point, you might be confused. There are a lot of other games that have Ganon as the bad guy. How is he supposed to come back if he is sealed away in the Four Sword? As we've seen a few times, the seal on the Four Sword sucks. Like bad. If Vati can break out of the seal on the Four Sword, so can Ganon. During this time, Ganondorf is able to quietly make his way back to the Gerudo Desert and amass a band of thieves. He is likely able to draw from the Gerudo since they are his people, and this would be one of the few instances that we actually see the Gerudo in this timeline. Something interesting to note is that the elemental gems that accompany the Four Sword can act as a gate into the Dark World. This is the exposition that we get from the Blue Knight in Four Swords Adventure. He goes on to say that using all 4 creates a path to the realm of the heavens. Strangely enough, the Triforce is said to be hidden in a golden land, and all artwork depicts it in the heavens. So let's say that someone were to learn about the Triforce and also happen to know where the 4 gems that could open a path directly to the Triforce. What might this person do? According to the manual for A Link to the Past, and I'm reading verbatim, quite by accident, a gate to the golden land of the Triforce was opened by a gang of thieves, skilled in the black arts. In a long-running battle, the leader of the thieves fought his way past his followers. The leader stood triumphant over the Triforce and grasped it with his blood-stained hands. This sounds an awful lot like Ganondorf killed most of, if not all of his gang members to reach the Triforce. Now, I'm not saying that Ganon killed all of the Gerudo, but he probably killed enough to make them isolate themselves from the rest of Hyrule. Naturally, this leads to the creation of the Dark World and the events of A Link to the Past. Link is able to find the Master Sword and fight Ganon. One of the problems that this poses is if the Goddess Sword exists and was turned into the Four Sword, how does Link obtain the Master Sword in this timeline? Luckily, we have an easy answer to this thanks to the actions of the Hero of Skies. After defeating Demise, Link places the Master Sword in the pedestal in the Sealed Temple. The important part is that he does this before he returns to his own timeline, meaning that the Master Sword that we use throughout Skyward Sword is present in the Murder timeline, along with the Goddess Sword that we turned into the Force Sword. This leads to the defeat of Ganon at the end of A Link to the Past. The next game in the timeline would obviously be A Link Between Worlds. Ha! I pranked you. You thought that just because these games share a map and themes, they go right next to each other in the timeline? Absolutely not. We have work to do first. We need to put Link's Awakening here. I have absolutely no explanation for why Link is on a boat or if he ever makes it back to land after this game ends, but something that is worth noting is the final boss of Link's Awakening. It's a nightmare that takes the forms of several bosses that we have seen throughout the series. This includes a giant blob, Ganon, Aghanim, Moldorm, and something that looks a lot like Vati. Next in this timeline is A Link Between Worlds, but for real this time. In this game, the kingdom of Lorule is on the brink of total collapse because of the destruction of their Triforce. This kicks off the events of A Link Between Worlds, where Yuga comes to Hyrule in search of their Triforce. He discovers that the Triforce of Power is with Ganon, who is held in some kind of stasis. He then discovers that the Triforce of Courage is sealed away and can only be accessed by the chosen hero. Then he devises a plan where they can take the Triforce of Power through force and then manipulate Link and Zelda into obtaining the other two pieces. Now obviously, if you've played the game, this doesn't work and everyone's happy in the end. And then Link goes on a much needed vacation to France where the events of Triforce Heroes takes place. Now we get to talk about Echoes of Wisdom. Null was sealed away eons ago by the three golden goddesses, but eventually this seal starts to weaken. Something that I always found strange is that Null only appears in this one game. After all, he supposedly has power to rival the capital G gods of the Zelda universe. That's when it all started to make sense. You see, the trident that Ganon steals from the pyramid in Four Swords Adventure has a unique ability. A knight of Hyrule specifically points out that Ganon uses this trident to send the four knights into the Dark World, or Mirror World. This is a trident that has the ability to access other realms. Fast forward to Echoes of Wisdom, where we see Ganon, or more accurately, an echo of Ganon, wielding a trident that we see access the Still World. I think the most likely explanation for Null breaking free of his prison is that Ganon, whether knowingly or unknowingly, started breaking into his prison using his trident. It doesn't stop there though, because when would Null have had the opportunity to make a copy of Ganon if he's been sealed away for the whole time? Well, in A Link Between Worlds, we go to the land of Lorule, where their Triforce has been destroyed and their world left to decay. Aside from this destruction of the Triforce, Lorule and Hyrule have nearly identical histories. This would include the sealing of Null in the planet by the three golden goddesses. If the Triforce is destroyed and the planet is decaying, this means that the prison that holds Null is also decaying, allowing him to slip through the cracks. Then Yuga brings Ganon to Lorule, giving Null the perfect opportunity to make a copy of him and claim the trident that can access other worlds. Regardless, we have the events of Echoes of Wisdom play out before eventually Zelda and Link are able to defeat Null and claim the Triforce, locking it away in the Sacred Realm once again. After these fantastic games and the full destruction of Ganon, we enter the start of the end. In the Oracle games, Link stumbles upon the Triforce and is sent on a quest that spans 2 kingdoms. During these games, the Twin Witches, known as Twinrova, resurrect Ganon using the flames of sorrow, destruction, and despair. This revived Ganon is quickly dispatched by Link and peace is restored to the land. This final confrontation is one of the last successes of the Kingdom of Hyrule before entering the era of decline. During this era, we have the events preceding The Legend of Zelda, where there's like a prince who does sketchy stuff and then gets his sister cursed into a sleep, and now all the princesses are named Zelda. It's a bit weird, but the important part is there is one Zelda who is cursed into a sleep. Then we have the events of the original Zelda, where Ganon is resurrected again by his minions and he immediately goes to kidnap Zelda and get the Triforce again. His power seems to have been waning because without the Master Sword or the Force Sword, Link is able to defeat this version of Ganon and save the Princess of Hyrule. Finally, after the defeat of Ganon, Link is led to a hidden temple by Impa and learns about the cursed Zelda. This then leads him on a new adventure to collect the full Triforce and break the curse that was placed on Zelda. This event is the conclusion of the murder timeline, and what happens after this for now is a mystery. I like to imagine that Hyrule gets its crap together and goes into an age of prosperity. This probably isn't actually the case because of, ancient curses, but for now, we'll head away from the murder timeline. Let's jump through the Gate of Time into the other set of events where Demise is destroyed using the Triforce instead of the Master Sword. One of the downsides to Link using the Triforce is that now a lot of people know about the Triforce. This knowledge of the Triforce is what leads to the Civil War in Hyrule, which leads into the events of Ocarina of Time. In the other timeline, Ganondorf learns about the Trident that gives immense power, but in this timeline, Ganondorf learns about the Triforce, which he deems more powerful than the Trident, and pursues that instead. His plans lead him to Hyrule, where he successfully manipulates Link into pulling the Master Sword and opening the Sacred Realm to get the Triforce. As for the Master Sword existing in this Wish timeline, we have a few options, and I'll let you decide on your favorite. First, we do see the Master Sword in the present at the end of Skyward Sword. This would mean that I don't really need to explain why it exists, it just does. But if you want to be a bit more complicated, you could argue that because Link leaves the Master Sword in the Murder timeline, it no longer exists in the Wish timeline. This would require that the Master Sword is still created at some point. Thankfully, Twilight Princess, which we will get to in a minute, explains that the Master Sword was created by the sages. You could argue that this makes this sword less powerful than the one that we use in the Murder timeline, which might be true and we will touch on later. Regardless, Link is manipulated and pulls the Master Sword and travels into the future. This first event of time travel with Link does not result in a timeline split, as I explained in another video. For the sake of time, allow me to say that time travel using the Master Sword is a closed loop, where anything that was going to happen already happened. It isn't until the end of the game where Zelda sends Link back in time to relive his childhood that we see an actual split in the timeline. This split leads to the child and adult timelines. Just to clear some common confusion that I see with the names of these timelines, the child timeline is called that because it is where Link goes back in time to relive his childhood. The adult timeline is the original set of events where Link, as an adult, defeats Ganondorf and is removed from the timeline. We will start by looking at the child timeline. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Link is sent back to relive his childhood by Zelda. When he returns, he wastes no time to go find Zelda and explain everything that happened. This change leads to Ganondorf being arrested and sent to the Arbiter's ground. It is unclear exactly how long Ganondorf stays here, but I would assume that it's a very long time since Twilight Princess is supposed to take place somewhere between 100 and 200 years after Ocarina of Time. During this time, Link goes to find his friend Navi, but accidentally slips into an alternate dimension, as you do, and prevents Calamity. Majora's Mask is cool, but has basically no effect on the overarching story of Hyrule. After being in prison for some time, Ganondorf is sentenced to execution, where he gains the Triforce of Power either through sheer willpower or through a technicality. It's never officially explained. Now, all of the events of Twilight Princess take place with Ganondorf being defeated at the end. With Ganondorf dead, the Master Sword is returned to the Lost Woods under the watch of the Great Deku Tree in hopes that it never is needed again. This concludes the child timeline, which means that we need to take a look at the adult timeline. This timeline is kicked off by the backstory of Wind Waker, where Ganon returns, but there isn't a hero to stop him. So the people turn to the gods for help, who in turn flood the entire Earth. Then we have Wind Waker happen, where Ganondorf returns but is eventually defeated by Link using the Master Sword. Ganondorf, along with the entirety of Hyrule Kingdom, is buried under the ocean. Link and Zelda venture to another land. Along the way, they get sucked into the realm of the Ocean King, where the events of Phantom Hourglass take place. Once this is over, they venture to a new continent that they name New Hyrule. And over the course of a couple generations, they are able to build a new kingdom, along with help from the Lokomo tribe. This leads to the events of Spirit Tracks, where Malladus attacks, but is eventually thwarted by Link and Zelda working together. Up until this point, the timeline is fairly structured. There are still branches and deviations here and there, but there are no serious contradictions. Where we run into trouble is adding Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to the timeline. These games have so many references and illusions that it would be more or less impossible to add these games to the timeline without contradictions left and right. This would be absolutely true if it weren't for one ambiguously canon game. And no, I am not talking about Hyrule Warriors. Well, I actually am talking about Hyrule Warriors, but we're talking about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. First, let's start in the Murder timeline. You see, at the top of this timeline, we defeat Demise, but before he fades, he mocks us and informs us of a curse that forever bonds his hatred to the blood of the goddess and spirit of the hero. This leads to the ultimate downfall of Hyrule at the end of the Murder timeline. And then thousands of years pass, and eventually a divine race known as the Zonai come to rebuild the kingdom. When they appeared, they were mistaken as gods, or maybe divine messengers, a gift to the land that many believe to have been forgotten by the gods themselves. As they rebuilt and banished demons, the people grew to love them, and eventually they made Lorule their king. With his help, they were able to establish the new kingdom of Hyrule. Despite their best efforts, the land of Hyrule remained cursed, haunting the blood of the goddess. It was not long before the kingdom was threatened by a man from the desert. But even though Ganondorf was able to get his hands on the powerful stones of the Zonai, he was sealed away by King Lorule himself. There's also talk about a princess that sacrificed herself, but I'm sure that's not important and definitely won't come back up later. Eventually, calamities began to erupt in the kingdom, but they were thwarted by a hero carrying a legendary blade, and a princess holding the sacred sealing power. The royal family tried to prepare for the arrival of the next calamity with technology, but it was too much. And eventually a calamity returned and laid waste to Hyrule, accomplishing what Demise's curse intended thousands of years ago. Perhaps with the destruction of the royal family and the entirety of Hyrule, the curse will dissipate and the earth may know peace once more. Thankfully, this isn't the case. Even though the murder timeline is left to ruin, there is still one little robot that remains to defy the odds. Terrako opens a gate of time and makes his way into a new timeline in an attempt to try again. This is where things get really fun. There are only two other gates of time that are ever opened in The Legend of Zelda, and the one that we use is the one inside the sealed temple in Skyward Sword. This little time portal is not simply letting Terrako use time travel. It allows him to literally cross the border from the murder timeline into the wish timeline, or more specifically, the child timeline of the wish timeline. When Terrako enters this timeline, something is strange. There are slight differences throughout the world. Link hasn't met the princess yet, he isn't the chosen hero, and as Gossip Guys points out, he actually uses a shield. There's also the fact that Aster is a character in this timeline and not the other one. Through some important influences, Terrako is able to adjust the events just enough to prevent the calamity from wiping out the kingdom, and the day is won. This comes with the sacrifice of Terrako, who is blown into pieces. Now, you may be wondering why exactly Hyrule is facing the same calamity in two timelines despite having radically different events. The answer circles back around to the Master Sword. You see, if we make our way back over to the murder timeline, the kingdom was not left to rot, because Link was kept alive just barely in the Shrine of Resurrection. After regaining his strength, he goes and defeats Calamity Ganon 1v1, and Zelda is able to use her sealing powers to destroy it. These are the events of Breath of the Wild, which then lead into Tears of the Kingdom. If you remember at the very start of Tears of the Kingdom, two very important things happen. The first thing is that the Master Sword is shattered, and the second is that Zelda is sent back in time. Now, the Master Sword breaking is kind of a big deal, because a few millennia ago, we trapped an evil god inside of it. The sacred object that holds the remains of a dead god inside of it is kind of supposed to remain intact. When the Master Sword breaks, the spirit of Demise is released. Naturally, in the murder timeline, it latches onto Ganondorf, who is right there. This is why I believe the dehydrated Ganondorf is able to return to his original form, and also likely why he looks a lot like Demise in his Demon King form. The Master Sword breaking is also enough to send ripples through other timelines, and it causes some problems. One of these problems is that Ganondorf is killed using the Master Sword in both of these timelines. This loss in power over time is enough for their spirits to cause mayhem in their respective timelines. In the adult timeline, this is what Malladus and Bellum are. They are a final manifestation of Demise's hatred through Ganondorf. In the child timeline, this hatred is expelled through Ganondorf, who is buried under Hyrule Castle, resulting in a similar creation to Calamity Ganon. This simultaneously explains why there are differences before Terrako's time travel and why there is a Calamity in the first place. This means that after defeating the Calamity in Age of Calamity, they don't need to worry about another Ganondorf coming to life like in Tears of the Kingdom. And in the adult timeline, Hyrule is still buried under an ocean, because it would be stupid for the ocean to go away when the Triforce was used specifically to seal Hyrule there forever. Now, the final question that I know a ton of people are going to ask is why Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have so many references to other Zelda games if they supposedly take place in other timelines? The lazy answer is that they're just not canon. That's boring though. And the fun answer is that when Terrico sent the champions back to their original timeline near the end of Age of Calamity, they were not the only thing that went with them. You see, the child timeline is a mess of convoluted time travel. The timeline is created by Zelda in Ocarina of Time. In Majora's Mask, we repeat a 3-day cycle for who knows how long. Twilight Princess uses time travel to enter the unruined Temple of Time, and then Terrico joins the party from another timeline. In other words, every time time travel is used in The Legend of Zelda, there is some remnant that is dumped into a contained timeline, which I think is the depths of Hyrule. Every game that is referenced in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom has some form of time travel in it. Even the Wind Waker freezes time in Hyrule Castle before Link pulls out the Master Sword. So there we have it. This is my attempt at rectifying the lore and timeline of this series for a second time. I feel a lot better about this attempt since I don't try to put the most obvious final games at the top of the Zelda timeline, but let me know what your thoughts and theories are in the comments. Thanks for watching.